Since we started, we've been doing cell referencing, but it hasn't come to mind that we are doing cell referencing. Why? Because we usually think cell referencing is in its own, it's something complicated, but cell referencing simply means to try to get the value, okay, of another cell by using the cell's address. Now remember that every cell in Excel has a name, right? The name is usually given based on what? The row and then the column name, right? The row and the column header. Now, for cell referencing, also known as the cell addressing, okay, they are used in a formula to refer to the content of the cell. So, for example, if you remember when we were talking about formulas, anytime we wanted to get the value in a particular cell, let's say cell A1 in the formula, and we wanted to add it to the value in maybe cell B1, we will say what? Equal to A1 plus B1. Now, when we say A1 and B1, we are referring to the cells, right? But when we are referring to the cells in that way, we will get the content of the cells to do the addition. Now, using the A1 and the B1 inside that particular cell where we are doing the sum is what we refer to as we doing cell references. So we are trying to get the contents that is inside cell A1 and then in cell B1 and combine them to get our value. Now, when we do that and we use those names of those cells in our formula, we are doing cell referencing. Okay. Now, cell referencing allow you to use values from different parts of the sheet and execute a desired calculation. So if the value is in cell Z2 or it's in cell AA1 or something, it doesn't matter where it is. The cell referencing, because you know that this particular cell contains the value I'm looking for, cell referencing allow you to be able to what? Refer to it and then what? Use that value. Okay. All right. I hope this is clear for everyone on cell referencing. If it's not clear, you can just raise your hand or unmute and ask your question. Okay. All right. Now remember that anytime you select a cell, right, you'll see that the cell will appear in the cell name box, right? So for example, if we select the cell, this is an active cell, we can see the cell name box here. If you go over it, you see name box, right? So you can see that the cell that we've selected, which is cell A1, is the one that is appearing here. Now, if we select the cell, the active cell, that's what will appear. So that's in the cell name box. So anytime you use the cell, you select any particular cell and the cell becomes active, then you get the cell name box. Now remember that any formula we write in the cell would appear in the cell bar, okay, the formula bar. And then the content or the results of the formula will appear in the cell. Okay, so for example, if I decide to do equal to 90 plus 10, okay, you see that we have the 90 plus 10 here, and we have it here. But if I press enter, we will have the value here. We won't get the formula there, but the formula will appear in what the formula bar. All right. Yep, Dora, you can ask your
Yeah, please, I can't see the screen.
question. Hmm. Thank you. This is why
Okay.
I've been saying, if you guys don't, because it's like I wasn't sharing the screen, and no one even mind. All right. Let me see the screen now.
Yes, please.
So when the cell is active, just like it is, you see that the cell name box has the value, right? But when we come to put in a formula here, let's say 90 plus 10, okay, we see that we have it here and we have it here. But when we press enter, we see that we have 100 here. Let's click on the cell. Now the cell becomes active. We can see the formula here, but we can see the value here. That is what happens when you use a formula in a cell. Okay. Now this place is the formula bar, which we already know, and this is the active cell. Now the cell name box gives you the name of the cell that you've selected. Okay, that's what we are seeing over here. So that's what we are talking about now. So the cell name box always refers to what? It always refers to by the using what? The row and the column headings. Okay, so when you select a particular cell, the row and the column headings of that particular cell will be what would appear in this what? Cell the name box. Okay. Now, for example, the cell at the intersection of what? Column B and then row 10 is what? Cell B10, right? So in the cell, the name box, we will see what? B10 over there. Okay. The cell reference of what? An active cell is displayed in the name box at the left of what? The formula bar. So if I come back, here, this is column B as they are saying, and then this is what? Row 10. So the intersection of column B and row 10 gives us the cell what? B10. Okay. So it appears in the what? The cell name box, which is on the same line with what? The formula bar. Alright. Okay. Now entering cell referencing by what? Pointing. Now anytime you want to enter a cell reference, you can actually use what? The name by typing it. However, one of the easiest way to go about cell referencing is to what? Point it. When we say point it, we mean to be able to what? Just pick it out by what? Clicking on it. Now to do that, mostly the easiest way is to start with what? The equal to sign. So if you're going to write a formula, every formula starts with an equal to sign. So the moment you write the equal to sign, whatever you want, whatever cell you want to refer to, you can just go and click on it. Okay, then it will be referenced. So the least error prone method of entering cell reference in a formula is by pointing to the cell when you cell you want what to be included in the formula. So when you write a formula and you want to say, okay, I want to add cell A1 and cell B1, instead of typing cell A1 and cell B1 where you can make a mistake, the most easy, okay, and least error prone method. When we say least error prone, where you make mistake, is to use what? The pointing method. That's just going to click on that particular cell. So for example, let's say we have values inside cell A1 and then cell B1. Okay, so this is A1 has 13, 3, 22, then 4. Okay. Now, if we want to put this in the formula, let's say we want to put A1 and B1 in the formula. Okay, we could do equal to A1, right, plus what? B what? 1. And you can see they are selected. We press enter. And this gives us the answer. However, like you saw when I was typing, when I was going to write the A1, I went to do exclamation before I came back. So to avoid those kind of mistakes, you can do a equal to, then instead of typing, you can come and what? Click on it. Then you can see it becomes a highlighted cell. Then I add my next operator, which is my plus. Then I can select any of these that I want to add. And then that also what becomes part of it. Then I press what? Enter. Then I get the same value. So that's what the quality means. Okay. All right. This inserts what? A moving boundary box, which is what you saw, the dash dash around it, okay? Around the cell, and also changes the mood from what? Enter to what? Point, okay? The address of the cell you point to, that is the one you click on, appears at the cursor location in the formula bar, okay? So let me just show that again. So if you remember when let's say we want to add these two. When I do equal to, you can see it's inside there. Now, this is where the cursor is. So if I click on A2, you see that A2 appears in the what? Formula with the cursor blinking by it. At the same time, A2 appears in the formula bar. So if I do minus, then you can see now it's mean that I've already done that reference. So it's no more having the dashes. So let's say we do minus 13, which is what? A what? 1. Then we have this. Then we can see that up there. So when we press enter, we know we should get there. Okay. Now you also can enter the range into what? A formula by what? Dragging across what? The range. We already know how to select a range. Okay. So you start from one point to the other based on how you want to do it. So for example, if I want to select a range of values, let's say we have values just like the ones we have in our sheet. Okay. If I want to use these in what? A formula, a function. Okay. I can stand here and drag this way. When I drag this way, you can see the space that I've dragged into. And this is what? A range. So if I have a function such as sum, and I want to pass in values. You see, I can pass one number, I can pass individual numbers. Okay, so for example, I can pass in cell A1, comma, cell B1, comma, cell B A2, comma, cell B what? 2, comma. Then I what? Close this and hit enter. Now that sums up all the values here. But I had to do them one after the other. But I know that all the values I want can be covered in a particular range, which is what? Cell A1 to cell what? B2. So if I want to do that, I can say equal to sum, bracket open, cell A1, which is the first point, and then B2, which is the last point. If you remember when we were talking about ranges, okay. So I do what? 2. So you use the what? The range operator, the 2, which is what? Column. Then I click on what? The last or bottom one, which I know is supposed to be the value. So I do what? B what? 2. Now you can see that it selects this whole area, which is the range of values that we want to sum up. Then I close the bracket, then I hit enter. I get the same results. Okay. Similarly, I can do equal to, then I have sum, and instead of using the typing, just like the pointing we are talking about, I can point to the range by what? Selecting the first cell, then I drag to the last cell, which gives me the range. Then I leave it. Then you can see the same cell A1 to cell B2. Okay. Then I can close this and hit what? Enter. And that gives me the same answer. All right. Okay. Any questions before we continue? Is anyone confused? Any questions before we continue? Any questions? Yes. Amanda, you can.
Sir, please, I don't understand. Please, can you come again?
Which side?
The part where you were dragging the two buses and summing them up. I didn't get that part.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Gabriela, is it the same question or is it the same concern?
So Mitchell, I actually don't understand this last part. Please, can you come back again?
All right. That's it. All right. So I'm clearing everything. Let's say we just have some values. Let's say 13, 33, 24, 2. Let's have another 45, 16 values here. Okay. And then let's have another here. All right. Okay. Now, if I want to sum these values by default, right, you do equal to, right, and then you say, well, I want to take the value in cell A1 and add it to the value in cell what? B1, A2, add it to the value in cell what? A3, right? Add it to the value what? Cell what? A4. Then I want to add it to the value in cell what? A5, B1, add it to the value of what? Cell B2, add it to the value of what? Cell B3, add it to the value of what? Cell B1, 4. Okay. Then if I what press enter, I get a sum of these values. Is that clear for you guys? Gabriela and
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
okay. So that is me deciding to pick them, point to them one after the other. Now, if you remember when we started, we had something called range, right? And we said what? A range simply means what? A span of what cells together. So for example, from here to here is a range, right? If I come here to write equal to A1 to what? A what? 4, you see that this particular cell that are in this range, that is from cell A1 to cell what? A4 have been selected. Do you get this? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is what we call a range. Now, a range doesn't need to be only horizontal or vertical. Okay. It doesn't need to be only vertical or what? Horizontal. You can also have a range that spans both vertically and horizontally. Okay. So for example, I could have had A1 to what? Let's say C what? C1. Then I have it what? Horizontally. But another time, maybe I don't want to sum them horizontally. I want to sum them what? The whole what? Set of values that I have here. So if I want to do something like that, I usually you would start with the first element of your range and then the last bottom element of your range. So if I want to select this whole range, then I'll select from here to here, right? So that means that I'll start from cell A1 to cell what? C what? 4. So in here, instead of writing C1, I'll change this to 4. And then you can see that the C4 highlights the whole what range that we have here. Is this clear?
Mm.
Hmm?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes,
Is it clear?
yes
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So now that we have this, we can decide to what? Put this into a function like the sum function. And what we are saying is that sum function, take this range of values and add them together for me. Are you guys getting it?
Yes.
Okay. So now that we have that, we can come and say that, okay, hello, Sam, right? We want you to do something for us. Okay. So you see, because I use the range, it has copied it to that place. So I don't want to have it there. Let's do it. Alright. So we can say what? Hello, Sam, right? We want you to do something for us. What do we want you to do for us? We want you to sum from cell A1 to cell what? C what? 4. Okay. And then we can press what? Enter. Now that is retyping in the values. But like you saw, when I was about to type it, I went to type the dollar sign, which what can cause issues if I don't pay attention to it. So the easy way is to use the cell what? Pointing. Okay, the cell referencing by what? Pointing. So you can say what? Hello Sam, grab these values for me. So I bring my cursor to the first point of my range and click on it. Then I drag over the stuff I want to add. If I want to add only here, then I drag up to here. If up to here, then I drag up to here. Now, if you see, anytime I drag to a particular side, you see the range of the cells change in the what? The formula. Okay. So if I drag here, you see that it changed to what? A1 to what? A4. If I move here, it changes from what? A1 to B3. If I move down, A1 to what? B4. Then if I move here, A1 to what? C what? 4. Okay. Then I hit enter. Then it's also what? Does the same thing. So that's what we were talking about. Is this clear now for Gabriela and Ito?
Yes sir. Thank you sir.
Yes.
Great. Any other question before we move forward? Great. So when you do that, you have what your range. So enter an operator or point to the next what cell or range. Okay. So you can do a range finish. So for example, let me just talk about this before we get to formulas. Okay. We get to do most of this stuff. You see the way we had the range here inside this. You can see that sum takes what number or range. Okay. So we can also have another range that we can add to this. We can have another range. So for example, after the first range, we can put a comma there. Then we can select another range. We can say we want to select this middle range and add that to as well. I get it. So you can see we have the first range being sum, and the second range being sum as well. Okay. Please, is this clear? If it's clear, just give me a thumbs up, or just give me a thumbs up if that's clear. Hello.
Sir, please, it's not clear. Oh.
So if we write this equal to, right, and we say sum, we always come to select something. You can select one and say what, comma, and select what, two. This one, the second one. So we've selected A1 and then what, B1. But we separated them by what, commas. Okay, so we had the sum. Similarly, if I come to do equal to sum, okay, I can also select A1 to what, B1, and I can say what, that's my first number, so I get the same value. But I want to get what, another number another range I want to add to this. So I can say what, after this particular range that I have here, I want to grab another range and add it in the sum. Remember, the sum can take what, numbers, as long as you are going to keep taking. Okay. So we take the first range as a set of numbers, and then sum will sum it up as what we got. Okay, which was a 58. Now we are saying that we want to what, add another set of what, range of numbers, which is what, these two. So we can do what, You can stand here and then drag that across. So you can see the first range was what? A1 to B1, and we have a comma there. Then we have the second range, which is what? A4 to B4. We have what? Another comma there. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what this would do is that if you take the first range, sum the values, and that will become one value. That is what? 58. Take the second one, sum the values, which is what? 25. So 58 plus 25. 58 plus 25 will give us something like 83, right? So if we hit enter, we get 83. So it's the same as me saying that, okay, sum these two, which will give us what? 55. So equal to sum, bracket open, then I write what? My 50 what? 8. Then I know if I sum these two, which is also a range, 25 plus what? 2, which will give us what? 23 plus 2, which will give us what? 25. That is what we were doing here as well. Okay, so this would also give us what? The same 83. So you can see that this, we added the numbers, but this, we used what? The range. Is this clear? Is this clear?
Yes,
If it's clear,
please.
just, all right. Okay. Now let's talk about the different types of cell reference. Okay. We have what we call the relative cell referencing, the absolute cell referencing, and the mixed cell reference. Now, a reference identifies a cell or a range of cells in a what worksheet. We've already seen that. Now, there are basically three main types of addressing, namely the absolute referencing, the relative referencing, and then the mixed referencing. Now, this is the simplest way I can explain this for you. The absolute referencing means that we are going to do a referencing such that something won't change. Either the name won't change, the row won't change, or the column won't change. That is the what? Absolute cell referencing. Or both won't change. Okay. So when we say the name won't change, the row won't change, the column won't change, or both won't change, okay, it's an absolute referencing. We simply means that we are locking them in place such that anytime we are referring to them, it will always be the same thing. That's absolute cell referencing. Now, when we come to relative cell referencing, there is some kind of relationship between how the cells are what identified. That relationship is what makes it what? A relative cell reference. Okay. So we'll be explaining that in details when we start with some example. Then we have what we call the mixed cell referencing. When we say mixed, it means that it has both relative cell referencing and what? Absolute cell referencing. Okay. So we explain that into details. And there's also one which is a fourth type known as circular referencing, which we are not much concerned here. But whenever we talk about circular referencing, means that you see with the way we are selecting the range, okay? If we are trying to find values in that range, we are trying to sum out the values in that range into a particular cell, and that cell itself is part of what? The values we are summing out. Then we are doing what? Circular cell referencing, okay? So it, it's not usually permitted in what? Excel, though it is used in what? Other what? Excel what? Other spreadsheet applications. Okay. All right. So let's continue and talk about that. Now, Excel treats all cell referencing in formulas differently when they are what? Copied from one cell to another. Okay. Now, when you copy a cell from one cell to another, you would see that there's always something that is maintained, which is the relativeness of what the cell. So, for example, let me show you this before we explain. Now, if I copy this cell, okay, that's Control C, and I place it here, okay, I get this value. If I copy it and I move it here, I get the same value. Okay, that's what we are talking about. But anytime you come to check in here, this is what? A number. Now let's say we copy, we do equal to A1. Well, let me put it here. Okay, we do equal to what? A1. And I do enter. Now you see this A1 that I've done here. If I copy this, okay, and then I put it here, we get 0. Why? That is where the relative referencing comes into play. So if you check here, before we got A1, we had to move, when we are getting A1, the particular cell we are looking at is somewhere 1, 2, 3, 4 away from it. So let's try copying the same thing again and put it somewhere here. We get the same value. Now this is because when we were referring to this cell, the reference or how we got the value here is like we moving from 1, 2, 3, 4. And that gave us what the value, which is 30. Now when we copied it the first time, we moved how many times? 1, 2, and 3. Which says that we didn't move the number of times we initially moved for this one. So because of that, we are getting 0 because the relationship that existed between the first cell that we have here, which was referring to this cell, was what? Forward movement. But now we copied that same cell with everything that it has with it, okay? The relationship that it has with what? The cell A1. And we moved 3 times instead of doing the initial movement, which is 4 times. So it couldn't refer to the exact value. The relationship was broken. So we got 0. But when we decided to copy it again and move 4 times, we got what? The 13. So that relationship that exists, that kind of link that exists between them is what we refer to as what? The relative cell reference. Okay. Please, is this clear? Is this clear? All right. Now, if you observe from here, we moved here. You can see this, there is nothing blocking any of these. They are relative. They are not fixed. Okay. So if I decide to drag this, if I click on this and I drag this down, remember, I moved how many times? 4 times here to get this value. So if I drag this down to the next one here and then I leave it, you see we get 33. This is because the cell here is also referring to this based on the same way this one was referred to it. So you remember this one, we have to move 1, 2, 3, 4 to get what? The value. So if we drag it down, the relationship between this and this is what? From cell E1, we are moving to cell what? E2. Remember, cell E1 referred to what? Cell A1. Now, if we drag it to cell E2, that formula that we've dragged to cell E2 would also refer to what? The one that what cell A1 was referring to, but also increased by the what? Change that it also did. So the change in cell the column E was that down. Now we move into cell E2 means that the row has changed. So in that case, the A1's row, which gave us 13, now the A1 will not be the one we'll be referring to by what? The change in the row, which is relative, which is what? A2. So if we click on this, we see we have what? A2, and A2 refers to what? This. So similarly, if we drag that one to down, what do you think we would get? Who wants to answer that? What do you think we'll get?
24.
24. Because we are also doing what? A reference of what? That particular relationship. So that particular relationship is maintained. So if you drag down, it also refers to this. So if you check in this, we see what? A3. And then if you move it down, it also refers to the next one, which is what? A4. And that is what? The relative cell reference. Now, if we copy this whole set, okay, and we put it here, just like we did earlier, we will still get zeros. But if we move it the 4 times that was expected, we get the what? The values. And that is the relative cell referencing. Now, if you check all the referencing we are doing, the cells we are calling, it's the same name as what? The cell name box that what? Those values are in. So there is no change to what? The referencing. So that is what? Cell relative cell referencing. By default, all cell referencing that we are doing in Excel are usually relative cell referencing until we lock the column or the row. Okay. So now let's get into the details of this and then we can move to absolute cell reference. Okay. Now, relative cell reference refer to what? Cells relative to what? A position in what? The formula. So you can see when I did equal to A1, we were what? Having a position, a relationship in what? In terms of position for movement to cell A1. That is what how we can get what? A1 into what? Cell C1. Okay, so that's the relationship. Now, when we don't want that, okay, we want that the cell should be specific, such that every time we do something, it remains the same. Then we do what? Absolute cell referencing. Now, absolute cell referencing refers to the cell in a specific location. Okay, that particular location is what we want. Whatever is inside it is what we want. We don't want it to change. Okay, so let's demonstrate absolute cell referencing after we remove this. Okay, now they're saying well, relative cell referencing adjusts when a formula is copied, while an absolute cell reference remain constant when a formula is what? Copied. Okay, so let's do absolute cell referencing before we come and complete this stuff we have here. Now remember that anytime you want to do an absolute cell referencing, you need to decide, am I interested in keeping a constant column or I am interested in keeping a constant row? If I'm interested in keeping a constant row, then I lock the row. If I am interested in keeping a constant column, then I lock what? The column. Okay. So in that case, let's say we want to refer to the same cell, A1, all the time. Or let's say, let me just take out this. We know that when we have to do calculation on tax or percentages, the percentage or the tax is always what? Fixed, right? So let's say we have here our percentage in terms of tax. So let's say 0.12 or 0.10, that's 10%, right? This particular 10% is what we want to use as our tax, meaning that our 10% shouldn't change, right? So if we come here, we do equal to, and we refer to the cell here, which is what cell what? F11, that's F10, right? So F10, we are referring to this value here. That is our tax, and we know that tax rate usually is fixed, right? So let's say we want to multiply our tax rate by the values in the cell here. Let's say A1, okay? Then we have this. So the 0.1 times A1 would give us something like 1.3. Now, if we drag this down, something mysterious is going to happen, right? This is what we are getting. Can anyone tell me why we are getting this? Anyone wants to give it a try? Why we are getting the first one to be 1.3, but the rest we are getting. Does anyone want to try? Does anyone wants to try why we are getting 0? Hello, guys. Hello. Who wants to give it a try? No one is sure. Let's give it a try. It will help you broaden your learning scope and then your understanding. So, who wants to give it a try?
Sir, please, I don't know the answer, but I want to ask the question.
Okay.
Sir, please, how did the 0.1 go from 0.1 to F10?
You said
How did the 0.1 go from 0.1 to F10?
F10.
F10, yes.
Yes. Okay. So the 0.1 here, we typed it in the F10. Okay. Then we said inside this is our tax. Let me give it a, let me just put it a tax rate. Okay. We know that tax rate is usually what? Constant, isn't it? Something like maybe 0.5 or 0.05, 0.15. Do you get it? Which is a percentage. That's out of 100. So 10% out of 100 is 0.1. Do you get that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now we are saying that let's say these are prices for values that we have. Okay. So if we want to calculate the tax on this particular one based on our tax rate, that means that we multiply this by what? 0.1, isn't it?
Okay.
So that is what we are doing here. So we are saying that here, take the value in cell A1 and multiply it by the value in what? Cell what? F10, which is our tax rate. So that gives us what? 1.3 in terms of the tax you are supposed to pay if this was what the price you are buying the item. Is that clear?
Okay, sir.
Okay. Now we said that I said we want to what work for all of them. So I drag this down, and now we have zeros. And I'm asking that is there anyone that wants to try? Why are we getting zeros? Is there anyone that wants to try? Why we are getting zeros?
I think that should be because the tax rate is not corresponding with the values. I don't know, just saying.
Okay. That's a nice try. That's a nice try. Anyone else also wants to say something? Okay. Now, if you remember when we initially wrote cell A1 and then when we did the formula, we dragged it down. We were getting the values here, right? Now we came here to write cell A1 and then what? Multiply by cell what? F10. Now, if we are dragging it down, that means that the next one will be what? Cell what? A2 times what? Cell what? F what? 11. But cell F11 has no value, and by default, a cell without value in Excel is having a value of what? 0. Is that clear? Is that one clear?
No, please.
All right. So an empty cell in Excel usually has a numeric value of 0. Okay. So if we drag this down here, we know that the A1 will change because it's what? It's relative. So the A1 will change to what? A2, right?
Okay.
But the F10 that we have here, we are once we are dragging down, that one too will be affected. That means that that one will also change to what? F what? 11, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Now when it changes to F11, does F11 have a value?
No.
No. So that means the value at F11 is what? 0, isn't it?
Yes.
Now if we take that 0 and we multiply it by what? The A2, then that means we'll get what? 0, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So when we click on this, you see we have what? F11 and A2, and that gives us what? This multiplied by this, which will give us what? 0. So it's the same way for the rest of them. This is because this particular cell is a relative cell referencing we are doing, which is what? The what? F10. I get it.
Yes, sir.
Great. Now, if we want to say that we don't want the cell that we are referring to, which is our tax, it's to change. We know that we are going to drag down. So if we are dragging down, that means that the rows will change. So if we don't want the row to change when we are dragging down for the F what 10, then we would what? Lock what? The row. And in between the F and then the 10, which one is the row? Between the F and the 10, which one is the row?
The 10.
The 10. So we don't want that when we drag it down, the 10 should change to 11. We don't want that. We want it to stand at what? 11. Okay. So because of that, we would lock the 11 by putting a dollar sign, the 10, by putting a dollar sign in front of it. Now, once we put a dollar sign in front of that particular row, we've done what we call what? Absolute cell referencing. We've stopped that row from changing. Okay. Is this clear?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we hit enter. Now, if we go back to drag it down now, you'll see that when we drag up to this point, it's using the 0.1 to multiply by this one. So that's why we are getting that. So if you click on any of the cells, you see we still have the same what? F dollar sign 10. Is this clear?
Yes, please.
Okay. So if we move to the next one, the same thing. The fourth one, the same thing. And that is what we mean by what? We doing an absolute cell referencing for the what? The row alone. And this is a mixed cell referencing because we aren't locking the what? The column, but we are locking what? The row. Okay. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we decide to drag this horizontally, then that means the column will change, right? Meaning that we move from F what to what? G. So if we do something like this, you see we get a 0. Why? Because our what? F is not what? Absolute. So if you check here, we will see something like B1 times what? G. but we want to maintain what? F, right? So if you want to maintain F here, then you what? Come back to your this thing, the formula here. Then instead of what? Having only F, the 10 being locked, we can also lock what? The F. Now when we lock the F as well, then we've done what? Both, we've locked both, okay? It's no longer what? A mixed cell referencing. So if we hit enter, we still get the same value. But now the column is also what? Locked. So if we drag to this side, we see we get what? The 10 multiplied by what? This. So if you check inside here, it's still going to be what? The same what? F10. But in this case, we've locked what? The column, and we've locked what? The rows too as well. This is this clear?
Yes, please.
Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So similarly, if we drag this down, it also what? Maintain the same 0 point what? 1, and use that to multiply by this. So if you check through all the formulas, you see that the values are not changing for these, but the values for what? These ones are changing. So you can see this one is what? V3, but the value for the F, which is our tax, is still locked. Okay. All right. Now let's get back to the slide. We are saying what? A mixed cell reference does both what? Either the what? Column remains absolute, or the row, and the row is what? Relative, or the column is relative and the row is what? Absolute. I've already explained that in the what? The Excel. Okay. So when you lock one of the columns, when you lock a column and leave the row, you have what? A mixed cell referencing. When you lock the row and you leave the column, you have what? A mixed cell referencing. Okay. All right. Now, an absolute cell reference has the dollar sign before the column and or what? The row itself, while a relative cell has none of that. Okay. We've already explained that in the cell. So when you don't have dollar signs in front of what? Your cell reference, the cell name, then you have what? A relative cell reference. But when you have a dollar sign in front of either the what's the name, the column or the row, when you have a cell reference, a dollar sign before in front of either of them, right? Then you have what? An absolute cell referencing. All right. Okay, guys. So this is a cell reference. So relative cell reference, this is a cell reference or range address in a formula that Excel interprets by what? A virtue of the location relative to the cell that contains the formula, which is what I explained by saying what? If we had written the formula inside cell what? E1, that E1 has a formula equal to A1, and we copy it and move it to a different place, because of the relationship that exists between E1 and A1, which is moving like 4 times, then that relationship would be maintained. So the moment the relationship is not maintained, then we will not get the exact value, which we already demonstrated. Now, when the formula contains a relative address is copied from one cell to another, Excel copies the relationship, which is the four movement that I was demonstrating earlier, okay, between the what cells and then the range in the formula in terms of their position relative to the what cell that is held in what the results, and then adjust the cell address in the copied formula such that the relationship is maintained. So when I copied the formula, which was equal to A1, to a different location, we saw that what the value changed, right? We didn't get the same value because the relationship wasn't maintained. But the moment I moved it to where we had the four jump relationship, then we had what? It being maintained. So for example, let me do another example on this using let me clean here before you demonstrate it, but I just want to give you examples on what the slide is saying. So if we come here to write, let's say a formula equal to sum. Let me just put sum. So sum, let's say A1 and B1, right? Then I hit enter. Now if you check here, the range was something like this and that. How many times do we have to move? 1, 2 to get these two. So let me copy this and then paste it here. Let me just paste it here or here. Let me paste it here. We get what? The 34. We get 34, which someone will be like, how are we getting 34? Now if you check in, you see we have what? C1 plus what? D1. Remember when we were here, we had what? A1 plus B1. How many times did we have to move to get A1? We had to move what? 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is the relationship for getting what? A1. It's relative. Then when we check, how many times do we have to move to get what? B1. We have to move 1, 2, 3 to get what? B1. Now, when we copy this, it also wants to maintain that relationship of moving what? 4 times to get the first value, and then 4 times to get what? The second value. 3 times to get the second value. So when we copy this and we pasted it here, it moved what? 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, it got what? 34. Then when we move 3 times, 1, 2, 3, it got 0. So what? 34 plus 0 give us a 34. And that is what the absolute cell reference. So though it's even in the formula, the relationship that existed between what the values we passed in the formula is still what being what maintained. Okay, all right. I hope that's clear. If that's clear, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, just send a thumbs up. Okay, great. Now, unless you specify what? Oh, back. Unless you specify otherwise, Excel uses relative cell referencing by default in all your formulas. Okay, so until you specify that you don't want that, it will always use what? A relative cell referencing. Now, this is just them trying to show you the same thing we just did. So if we write a formula referring to particular cells and we copy it and send it to a different place, the cell will what? Change, okay, based on the relationship. So you can read on this. We've just demonstrated that. Okay. Alright, so let's talk about the absolute cell reference. So we've demonstrated that, but I just want us to have a view of this. Okay. Now, as mentioned above, by default, cell references are treated by what? As relative sub-addresses, okay? Unless the columns are what? Either what? Locked by what? Absolute what? Referencing, okay? Now, to do absolute referencing, we need to precede either the row or the column by what? A dollar sign, okay? Now, the absolute cell reference are identified by using what? The dollar sign preceding the column letter and what? A row number of a cell. Absolute cell referencing is used to express permanent link to what? Values of a column or a row. Just like the way we what? Decided that we want to keep our tax value not changing. The way we are referring to the tax value, we want to keep it the same thing. And that is why we locked what? The row. And later when we were dragging horizontally, we decided that if we are dragging horizontally, that means that our what? Column will be affected. So let's lock the column too as well. And that was why we what? Locked the column. Okay. All right. Now the permanent link means should what? The content of the cell be changed or be copied and kept in a different place, the address would remain the same. It will not be updated, it will not be changed. So that we will still get the same value, but the relative cells that are part of the formula would change. Okay. All right. Now here's just an example. So if we decide that we want to lock the value in cell what? A5, then we what? Or create a permanent link to the values in cell A5, then we what? Put a dollar sign in front of what? Cell the A, and then we put what? A dollar sign in front of what? The what? 5, and then we lock it, just like the way we locked what? Our tax, okay? And then we can now use that to what? Do other stuff, like the way we're doing, we're multiplying A1 by what? That particular fixed value, which was what? In the what? F10. Then we did the same thing by multiplying B1 by what? The fixed what? Value, okay? All right. Now, when you enter an absolute cell reference, okay, by typing the dollar sign in front of the row or the column, you mean you want to make it what? Remain the same. You don't want it to change, okay? Or by pressing the F4 key when the flash insert point in the what? The formula bar has been what? Replaced, has been placed at the where the what? The cell reference is to be what? Made. Then you can get a what? An absolute cell reference in place. Now, each time F4 is pressed, the type of reference changes. For example, if you have A10, if you click on it, the cell reference will change from A10 to what? One of these. So let's see if we can demonstrate that. Okay. All right. So um ah, output. Mm, 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 so each time we press, the reference will change. Okay. Ajay, alright. Now the mixed cell referencing we've already explained. So this is what we mean by a mixed cell referencing. When you, in some occasions, you prefer to either what, keep the row fixed or keep the column fixed. Just like when we were doing the tags, we decided to keep what, the rows fixed at the beginning. Okay. Then later we decided to make what, the what, column also fixed. So when we decide to keep the row fixed and then the column is not fixed, we have an absolute cell referencing. Then when we want to have what, the row, the column fixed and the column fixed and then the row is not fixed, then we also have what, a mixed cell reference. So anytime you see something like this, $ G5, this is a mixed cell reference, or G $5 is a mixed cell reference. This implies that the column is linked permanently, that's for the first one, to column G, while the row is relative to what? Row what? 5. Similarly, the latter implies that the row is permanently linked to row 5, and the column is relatively linked to what? Row what? Column G. Okay. Now, therefore, when a formula contains a mixed cell referencing is copied from one cell to another, all the absolute addresses would remain the same. So, for example, when we're dragging, the the row remained what? The same. But when we dragged horizontally, the column changed. Okay. So that is what we are talking about. So, for example, the formula $A4 multiplied by B $3 has two mixed cell references. The $A4 has an absolute column, right? The column has been locked, and a relative row because the 4 is not locked. While the B $3 has the what? The column relative, and then the row what? Absolutely what? Locked. Okay. All right. Now this mixed cell reference allows you to what? Fill in the column and then the row data using only one formula. So if you decide that you don't want to change the row and you are dragging down, then you will have what? The same formula, but only the ones that are relative cells would what? Change. But the what? The absolute ones will remain what? The same, which we already demonstrated in what? Our tax calculation example. So whenever you are looking at this and you are a bit confused, you can also refer to that. All right. All right. Now, circular cell referencing. This I was just going to explain it as simple as we can go. Now, if you have a formula, you write a formula, right? And then the formula is summing the values from, let's say, A1 to, let's say, A5. And where you are going to place the value is within a, let's say we are putting this particular formula. Let's say we are writing some bracket open A1 to A5. Okay. Now, this particular sum function we are using is placed somewhere within the A value. So let's say maybe A3 is where we are putting this function. When we are putting this function in A3, then we say we have what? A circular cell referencing. Because the values we are trying to sum, A3 itself is part of the values. And that is what we mean by circular cell referencing. So circular cell referencing involves the use of what? Parent cell's address. Okay, the cell that we are going to put the value in, address, in the formula for the current what cell that we are working with. Okay, so we have a formula and then we are going to put the formula somewhere. However, where we are going to put the formula, the cell that we are putting the formula in is also part of the formula. So that is defining a formula for the current cell by including the address of the current cell in the formula, or simply put the definition of what a cell in terms of itself. So when we say circular cell referencing, whatever we are doing, if they tell you we are going to put a value in cell A1, and the formula that we have, the values that are part of the formula include cell A1, then that's circular cell referencing. So for example, let's say we are summing up the values here that we have. So let's say we have equal to bracket open, plus B4 minus B3, bracket close, divided by B2. And what we are doing here currently, when the cells where we are putting the value is any of these, so where we are going to store this particular formula, okay? If it's either cell B4 that we are putting this formula inside, or cell B3 or B2 that we are putting this formula inside, then we would have a circular cell reference because the current value that we are using in the formula, where we are storing it, that value, that particular cell is part of it. That particular cell reference is part of it. And that gives us a circular cell reference. So for example, if the content of the cell B3